we need to first define. Okay, so there's actually a formal definition for unemployment. It doesn't mean that, oh, you're not working, then you're unemployed, right? Okay, now, in terms of diagram, we just need to roughly understand. You don't need to memorize, you don't need to draw yourself. But for definitions, you do need to know for the exam, okay? Because you have short answer question, right? So you need to be able to do the short answer question. Minimally, if you cannot answer, at least if you remember the definition for any key term, you can still write them in the answer. Okay, that will give us at least 1 mark. All right. So unemployment, a few characteristics. First of all, the people who are willing and able to work. Okay, they are willing and able to work. Now, by this definition, right, we will have excluded some groups of people already, right? For example, I am a student, right? I am a university student. I am a postgraduate student. So I am perfectly able to work, right? But I'm not looking for a job now because I am studying. I am resting for, let's say, the next year, right? So I'm just concentrating on my studies for the next year. So in that case, I am not considered unemployed, even though I am not working. Let's say a baby. A baby has no intention, right? It doesn't know what's happening. It is not able to work, right? Because no skills, the body is not developed yet. So we wouldn't include baby as part of the definition. All right, so you are not including every single person. So some people are not included in this number because of the way unemployment is defined, right? Also, we say that it has to be of a certain age, working age. So this one very clear cut. Let's say usually we use 16 years old as the working age. So if you're below 16, then technically you are not considered unemployed automatically, right? So if you're studying, if you are even holidays, right? Let's say I finished primary school in Singapore. So we finished primary 6, right? And then we're going on to secondary 1 the next year. So in between, let's say there are 2 months of holiday. Technically, right, you could go and apply for work, a part-time job, right? Let's say a restaurant or cafe or something. But even if they don't, right, even if they just do nothing at home for those 2 months, they just go on holiday, they are not considered unemployed. Okay, so it has to follow this definition as well. Okay, then the next thing is they have been looking for all right, and this one is usually for a certain period of time, let's say 1 month, right? So if we just started looking for a job today, right, technically we wouldn't be considered as unemployed yet, okay, if it's not beyond 1 month, right? If you just started today, then they may not count you as being unemployed. Okay, because I mean technically today now I'm really starting to look for, but let's say the government when they are collecting the statistics, the data, they wouldn't know, right? Or immediately be aware that right now you have started looking for a job. Right? So it doesn't mean that as of this moment, this second, because I start looking for a job, then I'll automatically be part of the unemployment statistics because it is too fast, right? Too immediate. Okay, so I have to give like maybe some time so that they will realize that, okay, these group of people, right, they've started looking for a job for some time. They are now a part of the data, the statistics, because you see a lot of resumes being sent, still looking for a job, and we count them as being unemployed. So please do remember this definition, right? It doesn't have to be word for word, but you have to remember the parts. Things like willing and able to work, things like working age, looking for a job, and the last one, of course, you are unable to find any job. Right? If you do find a job, then you are not unemployed. That one I think should be straightforward. So you are fulfilling all this and you cannot find a job, then we consider you as being unemployed. Right? So for unemployed, the calculation here, right, they use number of unemployed divided by number of unemployed plus the number of employed. Okay, so the bottom portion, right, the denominator, unemployed plus employed, we call this the labor force. Okay, we call this the labor force. So these are the people who are able, who are willing to work, whether they can find a job or they didn't manage to find a job, right? All these people are considered as part of the labor force. Okay, so with this definition, we will exclude housewives, students, babies, young children, retirees, or people who are too rich. They just decide to retire now, even if they are 25, right? So they will not be considered as being unemployed or even in the labor force because they are no longer looking for a job, right? Okay, So this is straightforward, right? But the key portion for this section, right, in terms of unemployment, we need to understand the 4 types of unemployment. So it's not just unemployment and then full stop, right? So we even narrow down into specific categories of unemployment. So there are 4 types. 2 types are more common. 2 types are just a way of classifying. So you don't really need to know or remember that much. But the first 2, you may need to pay more attention to. So we have the demand deficient, or we call it cyclical. So this is the first type. It goes by 2 names. Okay, it goes by 2 names. Demand deficient, or you can call it cyclical. All right. So in the exam, whichever name you use, they are referring to the same thing, so it doesn't matter. So you can just follow what the question says. Let's say it asks you to explain what is cyclical unemployment, you just use cyclical. If they ask you to explain what is demand deficient, then you just use demand deficient, right? If you don't want to follow, you just want to use cyclical because it's a shorter spelling, up to you, right? It's referring to the same thing. Now, what happens here is this type of unemployment is because there are not many people buying things in the economy. This is typically happening with a recession. During COVID, right, as we keep mentioning so far, the firms started to lay off the workers. The firms started to, let's say, stop hiring, right? So new workers are not able to find jobs, and existing workers may also be retrenched, right? Because the problem is the government says shut down. So the firms that were not able to sell online, or they were forced to stop operating, they couldn't. So the demand for all these products, goods and services across the economy started to drop, right? And also at the same time, people start to be scared because they're not sure that they are able to earn a salary, right? They may lose their jobs already, so they are very uncertain, so they don't dare to spend. So the moment like the spending drops and the firms cut down on production and therefore reducing how many workers that they hire, it is going to lead to a demand deficient unemployment. So you can see how it gets the name demand deficient, because there is a lack of demand of products in the economy. That's why the firms are not hiring. And because they are not hiring, the workers, they are unemployed as a result, they will be classified in this category. Okay, so here, the first one, cyclical, or we call this the demand deficient unemployment. All right, so the gist of it, the main thing is because people are not buying, the firms are not producing, and they are therefore not hiring. So the workers, no jobs. Okay, so we condense this big paragraph into these few lines. All right. Next one here, okay, so to make it simple for you, right, I'll go through the 2 important ones first, then the 2 less important ones we'll put it at the back, okay? So this is one important one, so the demand deficient or the cyclical unemployment, this is important. Next one here will be the structural unemployment, okay? It will be the structural unemployment. So this and the first one, they are the more important ones, more likely to come off for exams as well. So structural, the reason is different. So all these will lead to unemployment. People cannot find job, but the reasons are different. The first one is because the firms are not hiring. They are losing business themselves. They are not producing as much. They cannot afford to hire as many workers. Okay, so that's the reason. Second one, with structural unemployment, it is because you lack the skills. Okay, so it's a different reason. Assuming now the firms are starting to use AI, right? We talk about AI a lot here. So we start to use AI, we expect you to know AI, or we expect you to be very digital savvy, right? Because it's all about technology nowadays. So suppose now I am very old, right? Let's say I am, let's say to stereotype a bit, right? Let's say I'm 70, 80, right? I'm still looking for some jobs, right? Let's say I'm still fit and healthy, I want to work. The problem is now, right? Assuming that they are keen on me, they are not discriminating against my age. They look at my skill sets and they see, hey, you actually don't even know how to use ChatGPT, right? You don't even know what ChatGPT is. We are unable to hire you because you don't know what these things are and you are not able to work with them. So there is a skill mismatch, right? We are looking for people with this set of skills and you don't have this set of skills. So even though we are hiring, we are not hiring you because you don't have the skills. So the problem here is unable to work, okay? Let's say another example. Let's say me, let's say personal example. When I first started working, right, many years ago, my first job was with a bank, okay, a local bank in Singapore. So at the bank itself, there are people who are at the counters, right? So you come into the branches, then you will see the people who are, let's say, at the sort of like front counter, right? So you go into the bank, these are people who will answer your queries if you have anything to ask, right? Or any matters that you can solve quickly, you will do it at the front counter. But suppose you need to do cash deposits, you need to do more advanced transactions, then they may tell you to take a number and you go to the counter inside the branch, right? So let's say those inside the branch, for example, right, inside the branch, the inner counters. So these are the bank tellers. So they'll take in your deposits. They will you want to withdraw cash. You don't like to use the ATM, right? You want people to serve you, then they will do it for you, right? Or you want to transfer money, etc., right? All these transactions. And you realize that now these transactions can either be done on internet banking, right? Or you can use the ATM. So even if you go down to the branch, the physical location, you can still use the machines to do it. So you need not go to go to the counter and get the staff to do all these things, right? So as they start using more technology, right, you have the internet banking, the mobile phone app, or if you need to really deposit cash, physical cash, you can do it at the ATMs. You technically don't need so many bank tellers, right? So many physical human service staff anymore. So then it raises another problem. If these people, let's say, right, not to discriminate anything, but let's say, right, this hypothetical person, he is not much educated, okay? And then he or she was trained in this area, right? And they've been working for, let's say, a few years, right? So they're comfortable with the job. And right now, because these machines are being introduced, this mobile app is being introduced, and these technologies can actually replace the job of the person. Whether I want to deposit cash or whether I want to do any transfers, whatever, I can actually just do it myself using my phone, or I just do it at the ATM, right? I don't need to go to the counter actually. So then in that case, these people become a bit redundant, right? Because the functions are being replaced. And let's say now they don't have any other skills, and also they are not that educated, so they become stuck. This was the job that I was working at, for example, and then now because of all this technology, I'm not able to work elsewhere. And so this is also another example of structural unemployment. Okay, so it need not be an old person, right? It can be a young person, and also you can be employed or unemployed from the start, right? So I can be employed, but because technology replaces my job and I cannot do anything else, I face structural unemployment. Or it could be the case where I was retrenched, right? Let's say during COVID, I was retrenched. So at that moment in time, it was considered as demand deficient, right? Or cyclical unemployment. And then as time passes, because I have not been able to work, or I didn't work for any reason for the last 3 years, 4 years, right? And my skills become rusty, okay? And my skills became rusty. I could be an analyst, right? Or I was, let's say, a technician or an engineer, right? So I was working with all this. And then later on, after 3, 4 years, right, I realized that all my skills are now outdated, right? There is a new system, there's new technology, there are new methods, blah, 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 which I could have learned if I had been working for the last 3, 4 years. But I didn't, right? I was just doing something else, or I was doing nothing, right? And in that case, when you start to look for a job again, you realize that, oh, because now you're not familiar with so many things that have happened in the last 3 to 4 years, you are not able to get a job. So from initially it was demand deficient unemployment, now you belong to the structural unemployment type. Okay, so now you are more like structural unemployment. So in that case, the reason why you continue to be unemployed is because you lack the specific skills. All right, so which is why the government focuses a lot on education and training, let's say in Singapore, right? They focus a lot on this area because you want to prevent structural unemployment. Okay, all right, so any questions you have, you let me know, okay? Now the third kind, okay, so this third kind and later the fourth kind, we take it as less important, right? So the more important ones you have explained above already just now. So demand deficient and also structural. The two types are more important, more commonly found. Frictional, and later on the last one here we have seasonal. These are the less important ones. Now, frictional says that it takes time to find a job. Okay, so it's nothing to do with your skills. It's nothing to do with the economy performing very badly, right? It's just as usual as let's say day-to-day life, right? You have different plans. For example, now I'm working at this company. I've worked here for a few years, and I decide that I want to change to another job. So in between, let's say I don't find a job before I quit, and then I start looking for a job. In between, we can consider this to be frictional unemployment. Okay, so that means they are looking for a job. They are unaware whether the job is suitable for them. So let's say I start looking for a job. It takes time for me to search through, and then I send in my application. The company itself may also take time to process the applications, right? They can receive many applications. They need to filter out those that they don't want. They will have to consider those that they think are okay. Then they arrange for interview, right? Then after the interview, they need to consider again, then they make the decisions. So in between, you have spent so much time, right? And even if, let's say, the company offers you the job, on the candidate side, right? Let's say I'm the one looking for a job. I may also have gone through the same process with 4 other companies, right? And because I'm quite good at what I was doing, 4 companies all offered me the job. Okay, so if you ask me individually, right, I am comfortable with any of the 4 jobs. But now, because all the 4 jobs have offered me a position, right, all the 4 companies have offered me a position, then I have a problem because I'm okay with all 4 of them. So I need to consider like the salary, the location, the prospects, everything. So I will need to consider, even if you don't want to spend so much time doing so, you would at least spend maybe 1 day, 2 days, right? At the minimum, or at least half a day, right? You're not just going to blindly choose one, for example, right? You probably will think through, discuss with family and friends, like, okay, this one's salary is higher, that one is a bit lower, but that one is nearer to my house. And then the third one has more job advancement prospects. The fourth one is what I really like, right? So out of the 4, which one do I choose? So you need time to consider. They need time to find, and you don't know, and from the start, you don't know which companies are hiring. So you take some time to search through the portal and you realize that, oh, these are the companies that are actually hiring, and then you think through, and then you apply, and you go through the interview, and then they may or may not offer you, right? So all this takes time. Okay, so it's going to lead to frictional unemployment. Okay, so it's because of the time issue here. All right. The last one, seasonal unemployment. Okay, so seasonal unemployment is nothing much. It's just saying that this is due to the changes in the seasons, like really the 4 seasons, right? The climate. So we won't have it in Singapore, right? It's forever so hot. It's just whether it's raining or not raining. I'm just waiting for it to come to year end, then it'll be raining every day. Right? Then that'll be very cooling. But for now, throughout the rest of the year, it's very hot. But let's say in the country with 4 seasons, right? You have winter, you have summer, and so on. So when it's very hot, right? Let's say people go swimming. Okay, you can see the example here, right? People go swimming and they play in the pool, they want to learn swimming, right? So they learn swimming, they need the instructors, right? During the winter time, when it's freezing cold, or even if when all the lakes, the pools are frozen, it is not that feasible, right? Or not that realistic to go swimming unless it's heated, right? Otherwise, you'll be very cold. So at that time, the swimming coaches, the swimming instructors may not have a job, right? Because if you're teaching swimming, and then when winter comes, right, no one is learning swimming because it's so cold, then you have lost your job. But you will get back your job when the seasons change. So it is because of the seasons. It is not because of your skills. It is not because people don't want to learn swimming. And it is not because you are trying to find the best swimming school to join as an instructor, right? It's not because of these 3. It's because it is now winter and no one is swimming, right? Therefore, you don't have a job. So then you will have no income for that few months of winter, right? So we call this call this seasonal unemployment. Okay, so seasonal unemployment, it is because of the changes in the seasons. All right, why we say it's not so important? There's nothing much you can do, right? Of course, obviously we cannot change the seasons, right? But what we can do is, of course, let's say we can get the people to reskill. So during the winter seasons, they can do something else, right? You can go and work part-time in a restaurant or something. So you tide through those few months. Then when you want to come back, or when it's spring, when it's summer, you want to continue teaching swimming, then yeah, go ahead. Okay, so that is the arrangement there. All right, so please at least remember the first 2. Okay, so demand deficient because no one is buying anything, so the firms are not producing. Then structural is because of the lack of the skills, so you cannot find a job. Frictional is because it takes time to consider, to look for a suitable job, right? You don't just find any job and you just take it, or you are not able to find a job immediately, right? So you may need to consider, slowly search, etc. Assuming you quit and then you get the job or you find a job, right? But let's say now, before I quit, I'm already looking for, and then I'm already found a job. So today I quit, tomorrow I start the new job. that one not counted. Okay, because you are still employed while you're looking for a job, right? Then the data, the statistics will not count you as unemployed at all. Okay, so it depends on whether they quit first or they quit. No, they quit first, then fine, or they start looking for a job, they find a job, then they quit, right? So the timeline matters. And the last one is because of different seasons, right? That affects the certain activities, right? It's not all. Okay, so certain activities you cannot do in the cold, so these people lose their job, right? Or certain activities you can only do when it's summer, spring, then they only have a job during those seasons. Okay, so that will be seasonal unemployment. So consequences of unemployment, this one, some could find quite intuitive, quite straightforward. Things like if they lose the job, they lose the income, right? So losing the income, then again, you can relate to like the lack of the spending ability. So your material SOL will fall, right? Material and non-material, we went through this last week. So we looked at material SOL is about how much you can afford to spend, right? How much you can afford to buy, to consume. So the more things that you can afford, the higher the material SOL. The less things that you can afford, the lower the material SOL, right? Then for non-material, it's more of let's say if I'm not working, right? Non-material could go up because we feel more stress having to find job. But at the same time, you can say that non-material can go up because we are experiencing more leisure time, right? We are happier without having to work, right? And you have more time for yourself. On the other side, the non-material can also drop because you are feeling stressed and having to find jobs. Okay, so it really depends on how you explain that, because you can explain different ways, right? So in terms of changes in your material standard of living or non-material standard of living, right? Things like hysteresis. So this is nothing difficult or what. This is just something that we explained just now before the break. Okay, so the longer that you stay without a job, assuming that you have not retired and you are looking to work in the future, then you actually face the issue of losing your skills subsequently. Okay, so let's say I stay home as a parent, right? And I haven't been working for 10 years. So the moment I come back to work after 10 years, right, everything is very foreign. Right, so if I have been working a few years and then I went to have a kid, I stay at home, now the kid is 10 years old, I come back to work. So we would see that the workplace is now very different, right? The way that they do things, the system that they use, the skills that you have also may not be relevant anymore. So that would lead to hysteresis, or we say that you have structural unemployment. Okay, so that will be the issue here. And let's say things like income tax, right? So if the government is collecting the income tax from the workers, from the firms, the moment that there are more people without jobs, right, then there will be fewer people paying income tax. And by extension, because these people are not earning as much or no longer earning, then the moment that they stop earning, right, they are not going to buy as much. So when they don't buy as much, the GST collection, like the GST tax revenue that the government collects, will also reduce. So unemployment, it has different impact, right? Not just on the person, but also on the economy, right? Which is also why the government wants to actually reduce or minimize unemployment. Okay, so here, okay, like, all right, coming back. So this one, there could be more. Of course, there are more. So feel free to actually add in your own points if you find that relevant. Okay, so it will be different answers lah. Otherwise, you can just look at this and then use them in the answers. Okay, so in terms of the policies, the questions ask, right, how do you address the different types? So you have to look at the reasons for unemployment. Okay, so let's say, for example, for cyclical, right? Cyclical, it is where the firms are not producing as much, right? Because people are not buying as much. So the main reason is due to the fall in aggregate demand. So in order to address demand deficient, right, we will need policies that's going to increase the level of spending in the economy. Right? So the government has to find ways to increase the spending. So if you tie it together, I use Singapore as an example. Let's say 2020, the policy that the government did. So they gave people cash payouts. Okay, so this is a critical year. Let's say 2020, this is a critical year. COVID came about and people have to stay home, like, lose jobs and so on, take a pay cut. So I'm going to disperse how much to everyone. Let's say throughout this whole year, every adults, right, above certain age, they're going to receive, let's say, 500, 600, 1,000. So every adult, when they receive this money, this is an additional, right, inflow, they are likely to go and spend, okay? You may not spend all, right? Probably they wouldn't spend everything, but they will spend a portion of it, right? Even if it's just 50%, okay? So everyone gets $1,000, for example, and they spend 50% is $500. The whole economy spending is now going to increase. All right, because collectively 500 per adult multiplied by the whole economy, right? That's going to be millions and tens of millions and so on, right? So this will actually help to boost the economy. Of course, this alone is not sufficient, okay? Because everyone is just going to spend that amount, right? It's still a limited amount. But the idea is you are pushing up spending. Alongside that, we can give, let's say, more cash. We can give vouchers, right? We can give vouchers for groceries or food. Then also we could cut tax. Okay, we could cut the tax. So the government can cut the taxes. We free up the money that people have, right? So that they have more to spend. So the different policies here, right? They are all aiming to raise the level of spending in the economy. Whether it is to target the consumers or let's say to target the firms, right? Or let's say to target the foreigners. So some countries, right, let's say COVID aside, let's say outside of the COVID period, some countries, they can actually manipulate the currency. Of course, this is a bit sensitive, right? It's saying that you are purposely doing something that is frowned upon. Okay, because technically, right, with manipulation of the currency, it means that you are purposely reducing the level of your currency. You're making it cheaper, right? And when you make it cheaper, that by itself may not be so bad. But because when you make it cheaper, your currency is now cheaper, foreigners will take advantage, right? Let's say we scan around. Let's say Singapore, right? Singaporeans, they love to go to Japan. Japan is a popular destination for Singaporeans. So when the Japanese yen recently depreciated, right? I've had friends bought some yen to store, right? Because they want to get this good exchange rate. And when you store, right, it means that you're going to spend in future, right? So the more I store, and of course, as a Singaporean, when I store yen, it doesn't get interest, right? And I cannot even put it in a bank account. So this is meant to be spent in the future, right? So you're going to boost the spending somewhere, somewhat, okay? Let's say in the case of Malaysia, right? Japan may be more limited in the impact because it's still further, right? You have to go to Japan to spend. But going there takes some planning because it's about 5 to 6 hours of flight, and then also it's far away, right, from Singapore. So you will need to coordinate like which period to go with whoever free travel friends and so on. Then you can go there and spend, right? So it's not as frequent. So let's say Singapore, Malaysia, right? Because Malaysia is just beside us. So because of the proximity, whenever the Malaysian ringgit depreciates, you see long queues of the people, and then they are trying to exchange for the ringgit. So the moment you exchange, right, sooner or later you're going to go over and buy things, buy groceries, buy food, go for massage, go for a haircut, and so on. And because it's nearer, you can go there more regularly, more often. So the amount that you spend will probably be more because compared to Japan, you can sometimes go, right, or maybe a few times the whole year. But if you talk about Malaysia, right, you can actually go every week because it's just a drive-in. And so it's that convenient, that easy to spend. So that it's going to boost the exports. So when it's going to boost the exports, the country where the people are spending is going to have more imports, right? So like Singapore, because we keep going Malaysia to buy things, right? We are buying back home, right? It's considered as imports to Singapore. So then if you recall with imports, right, it is actually a leakage of the whole economy, right? Because the more we spend in overseas or other countries, the less we spend in our country, right? So our country's economy will be affected because of other countries. Let's say when they reduce the interest, the exchange rate, and we're going to spend more there, right? So it's all related. Okay, so anyway, we'll talk more about this in the policy chapters. So for now, this is just a few ways to address cyclical unemployment. And for structural, because it's due to the lack of skills, right? So the key thing is about the skill level. So in terms of the skills, you cannot use back the same policy. We were trying to boost the level of spending, or we were trying to cut taxes, give people cash payouts. This may not help with the education level or the skills level, right? So if you want to address structural, it is more about giving them chance, giving them subsidies to go for training. So you have the policies like SkillsFuture. That's why we talk about this in Singapore's context. So we give subsidies to adults. So when you sign up for relevant courses, you can claim the subsidies. It makes your training, your education cheaper, right? So then you go for that, you raise your skill level, and then you are able to contribute more. Or at least in this case, you can prevent yourself being unable to find a job because of the lack of skills. So that will be structural. Then frictional wise, it is because of the time taken. It is because of the time taken because we are not able to, where is it? Yeah, right? Because we are not able to consider it very quickly, or it takes time to find a job. So then we want to make it much more smoother. So we can have job portals, we can allow the companies and the people to have a place to look for a job so that they are able to match more easily. Seasonal is probably just able to find other jobs, right? And then you can work those jobs during the other seasons. Okay, so but of course we can't change the seasons, right? So you have to find ways to you get other jobs during other seasons. Okay, all right, so that will be for unemployment. I think you guys are fine. So I'll move on to inflation. Okay, so inflation here will be the second part of this chapter, right? So for inflation, we say that it is to do with the price levels. So remember now we are talking about the whole economy. So it's not just price, but price levels. Price is for one item, right? The price of houses, the price of fish balls, the price of handphones. So this price, this number is different for every item, right? So when you want to lump all together, when you want to consider the overall prices, right? We refer to it as the price level. Think of it as an average. In a class, we can have everyone taking the quiz and having individual scores, right? But when we want to look at the whole class performance, we can look at the average, we can look at the mean, we can look at the highest, the lowest, right? So we look at the whole class as a unit. So here, the economy is a unit. We look at the whole economy. We look at the price level. So we say that inflation is about the sustained increase in the general price level over a period. This is the definition. So there must be a sustained element, which means that if the prices are just rising a bit now and then, and it's going to fall later on, then that may not count as inflation. So the formal definition will require a sustained period, right? There's no quantifying how much the sustained is, right? It could be like 1 quarter, 2 quarters, and so on, but it has to be showing that it's rising and rising and rising. Okay, so this is the word sustained, right? Now you have inflation. Inflation, the price level is going higher and higher. You also have deflation, where the prices are going lower and lower. That means, right, this current period, let's say, the prices are cheaper than the previous period. So in the whole economy as a whole, things are generally cheaper now than before. Then we have the case of deflation. So deflation, and then the last term, we have this term called disinflation. All right, this is the spelling, disinflation. So disinflation says that there is still inflation, but it is getting less, or it is getting slower and slower. So for example, let's say the prices, right, the price levels, they used to increase at the rate of, let's say, 5% every year. So every year, let's say look at the newspaper, every year, the inflation rate is 5%, or it has been 5%, right? And then now you notice this trend where it is 5%, and then 4.5, 4.4, 4.3, 4.2, right? So the rate of increase is slowing down, but from year to year, prices are still higher. Okay, you can follow this, or if you are familiar with physics, right? Speed and acceleration. Okay, so speed is how fast the car is going, right? Acceleration means how quickly the speed is increasing. So when there is still positive acceleration, the car is going faster, but it is going faster at a slower pace. So this is what we mean here, right? So the price levels are still going up. So if you plot the prices, you're still going to see an upward trend, but the rate of increase is not as fast, right? 3% increase, 2% increase, 1% increase, then 0.5% increase. So it's all increased, but it's increasing slower and slower. Okay, so we have inflation, deflation, disinflation. All right, so these are the common ways to describe the price levels. Okay, now consumer price index, right? Come on to the next part. Consumer price index. This is how we measure inflation. Okay, because first of all, inflation looks at how prices are changing, right? But one key thing is, what products are we measuring? Okay, because when you look at the prices, right, you must also ask, they are the prices of what? Okay, You can include the prices of every single product in the economy. That can be one. You can also just include other products. So you need not include every single product that is produced in the economy. Like in this case here, we have a common indicator, a common measure of inflation. We call this the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. Okay, so the CPI is how we measure the inflation changes for consumers. Okay, that's why the name CPI, right? So how it works is this. We are going to collect or we are going to first define a list of items that the consumers buy first. Okay, let's say the consumers, they buy eggs, they buy t-shirts, they go for holiday, they go for grocery shopping, they go for haircuts, right? So they purchase all these items on a regular basis. Okay, then we are going to include all these items in our list and we're going to record down the price changes. Okay, so what do you buy, right? You get a haircut, you buy insurance, you buy groceries, blah, 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 right? So these are the list of items that you buy on a regular basis as a household. Then we're going to track the price changes for all of these items, and then we're going to consolidate them into looking at the average or looking at the overall index, right, to see how everything has changed on average. So here, what is good for this is it is looking at just the consumer's perspective. We look at what the consumers buy and see how prices have changed because this is the direct impact on them. So if you measure the price changes of a haircut, the price changes of groceries, right? These are what we buy and how we as consumers will be affected. So these inflation figures will be representative for us. It will be accurate for us. So this is one measure, right? It's not the only one, it's one popular measure of inflation. So you can see here they include all these items, right? Healthcare, housing, utilities, your clothing, communication, recreation, etc. And then across time, how have the different prices changed? Okay, then we look at the overall as an average, right? So this is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So we say that if you calculate every single thing produced in the economy, right, it is not as accurate as CPI because things that are produced can be beyond what consumers buy, right? A company may produce a lot of machines, okay? They can produce a lot of machines that the factories will buy. So if you include all the products in the economy, then these machines will also be included, right? But it will be flawed because the consumers don't buy these machines, right? They may buy the products produced using the machine, but they don't buy the machine. So now if you include the price changes over time of the same machine, then you are saying that this is what the consumers experience. It will be wrong because they are not affected by the machine price, right? They're affected by the product's prices. Okay, so there's a difference here. Now, however, of course, this CPI is not 100% reliant, right? Also 100% accurate. There are certain problems. Okay, so this part, please do pay some attention because MCQ could ask you something from here, right? You may need to explain this yourself in the short answer question. Okay, so they may ask, so for example, one is now, right? The first thing is with the government is going to collect a list of items that people buy, but people are different, right? They are not all the same. There are certain items that everyone buys, okay? We can buy eggs, we can buy shirts, we can go for holiday and so on. But within those categories, the specific brands that you buy will change or will be different. Someone who is much more wealthier, their choice of clothing could be the luxury brands, and they only wear the luxury brands. So for them, inflation will be measured in terms of how LV, Prada change their prices, and that will apply for them. A lower income family may not buy the luxury brands or they cannot buy. So even if LV doubles the prices today, they will not be affected because they don't shop at LV. They are buying from different other brands. So now the problem is because for CPI, Consumer Price Index, they don't have different versions. They may have, right? But every version itself, right? Let's say as a typical one, the list of items is what one income group buys. So if we are looking at a typical household, right? Let's say those families that are earning the median income. Right, let's say for example, let's say in Singapore's case, hypothetically, let's say now we take the typical household, the median income to be, for example, 80,000 per year. So the average household could be earning $80,000 per year. So for this category of household, what do they buy throughout the year, right? They buy blah, 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 all this. Families that are richer than 80,000, let's say they earn $8 million per year, right? Obviously the spending habits will be different, right? Because we are much more wealthier, we can go for first class trips every day. We will not buy the instant food. We will not buy the cheaper brand of clothing. We will only buy luxury brand. Or let's say now we earn less than 80,000. Every year we only earn $20,000 for this household. Only 20,000. So then for this household, they cannot even afford the things that the $80,000 household buys, right? Because their income is only one quarter. So in that case, the spending habit is also different. So when we look at CPI here and you look at the figures, it may not be accurate and representative for all the Singaporeans because the issue here is not everyone has the same buying habits. So that will become problematic, right? When you're looking at to reflect inflation. Okay, so let me find you the example. Okay, there we can see how CPI is reported. So let's say we search for CPI Singapore. Okay, let's see if there's any news. Okay, let's say we look at this. Okay, so this article is taken from about 2 weeks ago, so quite recent. And you see here the headline, US June CPI data, right? So CPI data is regularly reported. It's also a very commonly followed indicator. So you see here, US monthly inflation rate for June, released in the evening of July 11, Singapore time dipped for the first time in more than 4 years, right? And then you can see that, okay, it's better than expected. So this is the period of June. And then the actual numbers, right? Negative, how many percent, 0%, 3%, 3.3%. So all these are the actual figures, the actual CPI, right? You can see CPI here. And of course, we compare with like our estimates or our previous month's numbers, right? So this is the actual figures that are recorded. Okay, so it's actually quite commonly used. All right, okay, any questions you guys have, just let me know, okay? So that's one issue here. Then also we say that for CPI, it may not account for all the new products, right? How it works is it's similar to how real GDP is calculated. Real GDP, if you guys remember, we said that there is this concept of a base year, right? Because if we allow the prices and also the production numbers to change, then GDP will not accurately reflect just production differences because GDP is price times quantity, right? It's expressed in dollars. So this year's price and next year's price can be different. This year's quantity and next year's quantity can also be different. So if we look at this year's GDP, we can calculate price times quantity. Next year, we also use P times Q. Then you compare the GDP changes over the 2 years, you report, let's say, 100% increase, 80% increase. It doesn't just mean the production changes because it is also affected by the price changes. So in order to keep the prices the same, we only use the base year price. Okay, so this part was from previous topic. So if you guys went to the YouTube already, you can actually take a look. I think it's already posted. Okay, the economy video. So you can rewatch that one, right, to see how we explain about the GDP and base year. Okay. So anyway, here, right, the CPI also uses a base year. Okay, so the base year, that means we don't change the items on our list every year. We don't change the quantities of the items very often. Maybe within a few years, right, we are using the same list of items. So the problem is when you have new products into the economy, then it's very hard to compare. Like this year, right? Like this year, for example, they launched this new smartphone, right? But last year there was no this smartphone. Then how is this going to affect the interpretation? Or let's say even more crucial. Previously we had no smartphones, right? Let's say if you backtrack 2 decades ago, no smartphone. And the moment the first smartphone was introduced, right, it's a vastly different product. Previously the non-smartphones, maybe they cost a few $100, right? And then now the smartphones cost a few thousands of dollars. So in that case, the different prices, if you use it in the CPI calculation, it will reflect that the spending or the prices of the phones on mobile phones are much higher than before. But then that again is entirely the whole picture, because along with higher prices, there is also a higher quality. Right? Previously, you may not be able to use WhatsApp on your non-smartphone, but now with the smartphone, let's say iPhone 3, iPhone 4, you can use WhatsApp. You can surf the net. It's a bigger phone, it's a color phone, right? So all these are different functions that you cannot just say, oh, it's more expensive to stop, right? You have to say that it's more expensive because the quality is different, the functions offered are also different. So all this here will limit the accuracy or the dependence or the reliance on such CPI indicator. All right, so that is with inflation. Well, let me pause for a while, see if there's any question until now, right? Whether it's about ADAS, unemployment, or inflation up to what we've covered. Okay, so no issues, then I move on. Okay, so same thing with unemployment. Unemployment, we have 4 types, right? So inflation, we have 2 types. Okay, so we have 2 main types, right? You just need to know the 2 main types, 2 main categories. So both are important, both come from different reasons, right? So we will need to be able to explain both well. Okay, so first type, we say that we have the demand pull inflation. Okay, so if you link to the diagram, right, this is how it looks like. So you have AD curve shifting rightwards. Okay, so let's say now we see that AD is going to the right side, right? The more it goes to the right side, the higher the price levels. So this is going to lead to demand pull inflation. Okay, this is going to lead to demand pull inflation. So the increase or the higher AD is, the higher the price levels. Okay, so that is demand pull inflation. So demand pull inflation is because of increase in AD, right? Why is AD increasing? Because consumers are spending more, or because the firms are spending more, or because the government is spending more, or because the foreigners are spending more. All right, so these 4 main categories of spending, they can actually cause demand pull inflation, right? This is the theoretical portion, but in the real context, right, realistically, which component is more likely to lead to demand pull inflation? Unlikely it will be the government. Okay, so first thing, it unlikely will be due to government. On a regular day-to-day basis, right, let's say we are not in a crisis, the government is not going to spend aggressively. So like right now in Singapore's case, right, we are not spending aggressively, we're just spending like normally, okay? If you compare with, let's say, COVID, right, COVID period, because of that situation, the government had to spend more. But then again, it was because the other categories, consumers, firms, and foreigners, they were spending much less. So the government spending more, the government stepping up to spend more, is only going to balance off the decreases. Okay, so it's not going to lead to a great increase in the overall aggregate demand. So government spending probably not the reason. Usually it could be due to the consumers. So let's say in the US case, right, consumption spending would play a big factor. First of all, right, we say that for US, the economy is made up about 2/3 or slightly more than 2/3, right? The economy, so economic growth in US, right, more than 2/3 comes from consumption spending. Okay, because the domestic market is very big, right, very large. There's a big population. So when people spend a lot, right, it will contribute to a significant portion of US GDP. Okay, so because this is a big portion, right, and when people spend, the price levels will be much affected by consumption spending as a result. Okay, thanks for asking. Okay. Then I have something to say, right? Otherwise, no one asks question. I'm talking to myself. Okay, so let me finish my story first, okay? So US, right? US, that would be mostly due to the consumption spending, right? Then to some extent, it could be due to the other 2, right? Investment spending, which is the firms buying machines, and then also the foreigners. Okay, but it wouldn't be the case. It wouldn't be a major factor in US, right? Because investment spending and export, right, revenue, they are not the main sources of economic growth. So even if these 4 categories are possibilities, right, in real life, you have to see like which one will play a bigger role or play the most significant role. Okay, now back to the question raised in the chat. Okay, thanks for the question. A main cause of unemployment in Singapore, right? Okay, so generally we would say that it would be a mixture of cyclical and structural. Okay, if you want a very straightforward answer, it will be cyclical and structural. All right. If you go more in depth, right? Let's say during the recessionary period, the financial crisis, and then also during COVID, right? Recently, the main problems, right, especially at the start for, let's say, when the problems first started happening or unfolding, the main problems or the main reasons for unemployment would be cyclical unemployment. Okay, because the firms were either retrenching, not hiring, right, or in COVID's case, they cannot operate, right? So the workers cannot find jobs, they cannot work. So cyclical unemployment actually shot up a lot. And you could see that in US case as well. Okay, so let me digress a bit now. US unemployment. Here, just nice. Okay, this one, okay, just this line, right? It may be a lot of words here. So you can see unemployment rate increased in 2020, surging to 13% in the second quarter of the year, before easing to 6.7% in the fourth quarter, right? This was the case for US, okay? I know we're talking about Singapore, okay, but because we have the similar situation. So Singapore, US, right, both, we faced a lot of cyclical unemployment during COVID. Okay, so unemployment went, right, because people couldn't find jobs. That was during the COVID period, cyclical unemployment came about. Then if you're asking like usually right now, usually like in the more day-to-day basis, right? Then Singapore's case will be more towards the structural problem. So the structural issue could be like, it could be due to the lack of skills, right? So the lack of skills is one thing. So assume that, let's say current situation, right? The firms are hiring, they need all these skills, and then the workers don't have, you have structural unemployment. But if you look at the more dynamic situation, right? Because the whole economy is changing very often, right? The whole industries, every industry, they are changing very often. So yeah, let's say now, right? Let's say now, because AI was introduced 2 years ago and firms quickly adopted. So you have new advancements in technology every few years and people adopt this. It makes it a very constant, you have to constantly upgrade yourself. So it's not like, oh, okay, now I work for 20 years. Let's upgrade one time. Then I can just work until I pass away or I retire, right? Not like that. Every few years they keep upgrading. So every few years you have to keep improving yourself also. And that becomes a problem because you have people who may not be able to go for training, right? Much not so much because of the education, right? Not so much because of accessibility, because usually these should be quite affordable. More towards like maybe we are unable to learn, maybe because we don't have time as well, right? So all these different factors means that we are getting less relevant, right? Or because it's changing so fast that we are unable to keep up. So then structural unemployment occurs as well. Okay, then okay, let's come back now. Okay, so yeah, so to answer the question, cyclical would be more in the recessionary periods. Structural would be more like day-to-day basis, right? To some small extent, there will be some frictional unemployment as well. Okay, but if you ask if this is a major concern, not so much, right? Because right now it is normal. Okay, it is normal that people take time to think about a new job, or sometimes we really cannot take it, we quit, then we start finding, right? So it is not always that you plan out nicely, you find a job, then you quit your current job. So there are people who take time to look for a new job after quitting. So in that case, because the period is relatively short, right? We typically just use like JobStreet, Job Central, etc. in Singapore. So the whole process is very short. Then unless you want to think very long, okay, otherwise usually like once you apply, they get back, you get a job. It could be within a few weeks, right? 1 or 2 weeks. So then it's hardly a concern. So structural more problematic, a cyclical usually not an issue, right? So yeah, that's a rough landscape. Okay, thanks for letting me say something different. Okay, otherwise I'm just following, right? And not sure if you guys are still here also. Thank you. Okay, all right. So inflation, so inflation, we have the first type. Okay, we have demand pull inflation. We have demand pull inflation. So that's one. Then the second type of inflation, which we also need to know, okay, this is the cost push inflation, right? The cost push inflation. So it is drawn like this. Now you recall that just now when we went through the ADAS chapter, right? AS curve can actually be drawn like that, right? It can be drawn like that, okay? The green, red, three sections, right? So if you were to shift the curve, you see it starts from here, AS, then it goes AS1, AS, right? So the horizontal and the upward sloping sections, the green, red sections, they are going up. You can see here, right? They are going up. So these two portions, they are actually going up. Okay, they are going up. So the going up here is similar to the supply curve shifting leftwards, right? So if you recall the supply curve, when you shift left, it means that supply is decreasing, getting less and less supply, right? But the problem here is because it's horizontal. Okay, so there is no left. You cannot draw left, right? Because it's horizontal. So when it's horizontal, how we draw is we will draw up. Okay, so when it's going up, it is supply or aggregate supply decreasing. Less and less aggregate supply as well. Okay, so why is there aggregate supply decreasing? Because of the higher cost of production. Okay, so we say that cost push inflation. Okay, so demand pull inflation is because aggregate demand is increasing. This is the main reason lah. Okay, for cost push inflation, it is because of the fall in aggregate supply. And why is aggregate supply decreasing? One main reason, because of higher cost of production. So when you look at the notes here, right, it will give you different kinds of higher cost of production. It could come from the firms having to pay the workers more salary. Okay, that can be one. It can come from the firms wanting or having to buy more expensive raw materials from overseas. It can come from the government taxing the firms, so the firms have higher costs. So all these are reasons why the cost of production went up. So higher costs for the firms. But you have to also look at the specific reasons, right? You cannot just say, oh, higher cost for stock. Okay, so you have to explain like, okay, because of this specific reason, cost of production went up, and the firms have to raise the prices to offset the higher cost. Okay, so that is the whole sequence, right? So either it's because you have to pay higher wages. Higher wages here, let's say COVID again. Okay, COVID was a sad incident, right? But in terms of explanation for our topic here, right, there's a lot of examples. So during COVID, let's say in Singapore's case, when they closed the borders, right, they also restricted how many foreign workers could come in. Okay, so if you're aware of the delays in the house constructions in Singapore, right? A few years ago, during COVID period, because of the lockdown, we couldn't bring in the foreign workers. Okay, so the construction industry actually suffered because they don't have more and more foreign workers coming in, and the number of foreign workers became limited. Right, you cannot keep increasing. It may only decrease or it can stay the same. But because you are building so many houses at one go, and of course, more and more people need houses, right? Because you have people growing up, they want to buy a house, or like they, for whatever reasons, okay, they're buying a house, and more houses have to be built, but you don't have more and more construction workers, right? Because of the border closures. So the cost to the construction firms actually went up because the workers were getting higher pay. Okay, so the cost or the wages of the workers went up because of the decrease in supply, right? It's classic demand supply. So with the decrease in supply of the workers were drawing higher salary. The firms had to pay them more, and that was a higher cost of production. And then across the board, when you have a shortage of workers, it's going to lead to cost push inflation. So this is straightforward, right? Then let's say with imported inflation. Imported inflation, here they say that it is because of the lower domestic currency value. Let's say in Malaysia's case, let's say in Malaysia. So suppose now Malaysia buys raw materials from Singapore. By now, I think you already know because you hear me saying so many times, right? The currency value of the ringgit had been dropping. Right now, I think it's sort of stabilized, but previously it was like falling. So every few days, you go and check the money changer. It's like from 1 Sing dollar to 3.2, then it became 3.3, right? 3.4, that kind of thing. So from the Malaysian firm's perspective, whenever we buy something from Singapore, it costs more and more. Imagine now, for example, the raw material that I buy from Singapore costs 1 Sing dollar. Okay, to keep it simple, the raw material that I buy from Singapore costs 1 Sing dollar. Previously, 1 Sing dollar, I just need to spend 3.2 ringgit. I can buy already, right? So it cost me 3.2 ringgit, the Malaysian currency. Then later on, it became 3.3 ringgit. So now I have to pay 3.3 ringgit to buy that same item. Then later on again, it costs 3.4 ringgit. Right? So you can see that in Singapore's pricing, it didn't change. It's still $1. $1, $1, right? But because of the depreciation of the Malaysian currency, it became more and more expensive, right? 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. So then to the firms, because they spend more to buy the raw materials, they have to charge the customers higher, right? Because it's more expensive. So then the prices of the items they sell also kept going up. Okay, so it became more and more expensive because we're buying more and more expensive from Singapore, right? So that is the impact. Okay, so this is cost push inflation. Now, demand pull inflation, if you have to compare both types, right? Demand pull inflation is because of the higher aggregate demand. So there is actually a silver lining, right? Silver lining means there is something good out of this whole situation. So yes, we have demand pull inflation, which is that prices are rising and rising. However, while we have inflation, you are also getting economic growth, right? You can see that the GDP is rising and rising. So it's not all bad, right? You just get a trade-off. So you get growth, but unfortunately, you get higher prices. Okay, so this is still a bit of a not so bad situation, right? Although it's not as good as well. So it's a half situation, right? On the other side, if you look at the case with a decrease in aggregate supply, then there is an issue, right? Because with this situation, let's say we started from AS, right? So this is the starting equilibrium. So it's point E to F to G, right? This is how it goes, E to F to G. You are experiencing not just higher prices, right? So there is higher prices, cost push inflation specifically. There is also slower economic growth. So technically, we are losing a lot, right? Or you are suffering a lot. Prices are higher, economy is growing slower, and whenever economy is growing slower, we can assume that there are fewer jobs available. Because when the GDP is falling, right? Here they say GNP, but we'll just take it as GDP. So the GDP is falling means we are producing less, right? When you produce less, you are also hiring fewer workers because you don't need to produce so much, right? So we will just hire a few workers. So then in that case, unemployment also goes up. So higher unemployment, slower growth, higher price levels. So at one time, you are worsening or you are getting further away from three macroeconomic objectives, if you realize. And so we have a few. We want high growth, but you're getting slower growth. You want low and stable prices, now you're getting higher prices. You want low unemployment, now you're getting higher unemployment. So you're actually losing a lot in this case. And this situation has a special name for it. Let me see if it's included. Yes, here, right? It has a special name for it. It's called stagflation. Okay, so if you go search for news on stagflation, right, you may find some examples. So it is where you are experiencing high inflation, high unemployment, together with low economic growth. So it's a whole mixture of bad things, right? So you have a whole mixture of bad things all happening at the same time, right? So let's say with Ukraine-Russian war, right? During that that ongoing war. So because the economy is not producing, growth is slowing down, the raw materials are now costing higher and higher because of the lack of supply, and the raw material costs will spill over to the prices that the firms charge, right? Because when they buy more expensive material, they're going to raise the prices for consumers later. So that's also going to increase price levels. Then at the same time, because of the war, because of less production, unemployment also goes up. So you can say that in where you have all those conflicts and wars happening, right, you could also be experiencing stagflation. So not a good thing. Again, if you're looking at how to address all these issues, we'll take a closer look at the policies subsequently, right? But here for demand pull, for example, for demand pull inflation, the main issue here, the main problem here is we have very high inflation, right? So the government may try to slow down or it may try to pull down the AD. Okay, so on its own, AD may be increasing too fast, too much. So the government's job here is to pull back the AD because economic growth is high enough that it is okay letting it slow down. While at the same time, because price levels are also very high, our main purpose is to bring it back to a more normal level, right? So you will see policies like increasing interest rates. You'll see policies like the government raising taxes and income tax. So all these are meant to pull back AD. Okay, so if you go and search after US, let's say in 2022, after they realized that the inflation rate was getting out of hand, the central bank came in, Federal Reserve came in to increase the interest rate. Okay, so this is part of a monetary policy that we'll go through either tomorrow or next week. Okay, so we're going to go through that as well. Then when the government does something, they're also implementing some policies, right? So that's on the government side. On this side here, if you're going to what we explained just now, then it may not be so ideal because whenever you shift the AD higher, the price levels will go up higher and higher, right? If you pull back the AD, let's say you make it shift leftwards with your policies, then the economic growth will slow down even more. So in that case, shifting the AD curve may not be so appropriate in this context, right? So instead, you may need to use other policies to shift the AS curve instead, because here, the problem is with the AS curve shifting. That's why you experience stagflation. So you may need to shift the AS curve, then you can address the root cause of the problem, right? Whereas above, it was because of the AD curve shifting, so you can shift the AD curve, right? But if you want to shift the AS curve, it is also possible as well. So we'll take a closer look at the policies in the subsequent chapters. Now, last part for consequences of high inflation, we can say that again, right, when things are way too expensive, what's going to happen? Okay, this one on its own, I think you can also give some reasons like, oh, it's too expensive, we cannot afford to buy things, right? So your material SOL is going to worsen. So we cannot afford as much as possible. The consumers become worse off. They will lead worse. Okay, so that is one, right? Then let's say in terms of your certainty, right, the level of certainty. So this one could be good with the firms. So if the prices are changing a lot, right, it's fluctuating a lot, it will affect the firm's planning, as we mentioned last week, right? The firms, they want certainty. Let's say today you're starting a business, you want to make sure that you can plan out you can do a forecast of your revenue and cost quite accurately. But then it makes it less certain for you to enter the market, right? Because you're not sure if you can even earn money. So we wouldn't want to enter if that country's inflation rate is like so unpredictable. Okay. Then you can also mention like if your prices are too expensive, foreigners don't buy, right? So they will look at your prices, even if let's say the exchange rate is favorable for them, they will still see, well, actually it's quite expensive, right? We wouldn't want to buy. Like as a personal experience, let's say I used to go Taiwan, right? I like to go Taiwan. So previously, let's say before COVID, I think the last time I went was in around 2019. Then post-COVID, the first time I visited was last year in March, right? So it was about 3-4 years gap because in between was COVID. Then the exchange rate didn't actually change much, to be honest. Usually it is about $1 to between 22 to 24 Taiwan dollars. So before COVID and even after COVID, right, the exchange rate was around the same range. $1, you can get about 22 to 24 Taiwan dollar, right? Around that the range. So exchange rate wasn't affected. When we look at the pricing in Taiwan, right, when we're over there, when we buy food, we buy things, realize that the prices are higher over there. Especially let's say in terms of food. Right? Last time they can charge this price, but now when you go back to the same store after 4 years, the store is still around, but the prices have increased, right? And it makes it less attractive to buy because let's say you may like, let's say for me again, because let's say we visit certain stores, we like it because it's cheap. When you compare to Singapore, of course, it is still cheaper, right? Even now, but at that time, let's say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was so cheap that even if you order 2 bowls, 3 bowls of rice, it will still be very cheap. Okay, that kind of thing. Or a small dish, right? It could cost like $1 last time. Now maybe it costs $1.50, $2. So the prices have actually increased a lot. And you realize that it is more expensive, makes you want to spend less. Okay, so that's going to affect how attractive, how competitive the exports will become. Okay, so you can take a look at all these points here. All right. Any questions that I can address up till now? More or less, the key points for this chapter is done, right? Going progress quite well. So we finished ADAS. We looked at unemployment inflation today as well. Okay, then I can't remember what's the next topic, right? But we will probably be able to finish the policies as well. Then we should have some time for doing the practice questions, the last section next week. Okay, so that's the rough plan. Okay. Okay, so hold for a while. Any questions you have regarding the contents from today, or if you experience any issues with the quiz, right? Or if your attendance has anything, you have to let me know. Okay, so we can rectify all this on the spot. Unstable economy. Okay, unstable economy. Okay, how you define this can be very different. If you are looking at, let's say, an advanced economy, usually, like, let's say Singapore, okay, no issues. Then if you're experiencing like a crisis like COVID, or let's say financial crisis like one decade ago, yeah, about 1, 2 decades ago, 2008, 2009, then usually the government will step in with the policies, right? So they will look at the issue of the problem. Like this time, let's say with COVID, it was because people cannot come out to work. And if they cannot come out to work, there will be many people losing the jobs, right? So we fix that so we call this fiscal policy, right? FISCAL, fiscal policy. It is done by the government. So they will look at the root cause and they say, okay, people are, let's say, when I suddenly lose my train of thought. So people are losing jobs because they cannot work, right? So we allow them to work as, let's say, the safety ambassadors. So if you are, let's say, in the airline sector, right? So you go and work as safety ambassador. So you go around like catching people who are coming too close together. So you can redirect the jobs. So these are some of the ways to tide through the crisis. Then if you're looking at things like because of war, because of all these struggles, like I think Myanmar has some internal war, right? Then Ukraine and Russia has a war as well. So all these you may need to look outside economics, right? It could be because of certain political issues that affects the whole economy as well. So we may need to fix this so that the economy can actually recover. Okay, so because it's politics, like that one I'm not too familiar, so I can't discuss much. But roughly that's how I feel. Okay, before I answer your question. Then why some monopolies allowed to exist? Okay, monopolies, we have a special class called the natural monopolies, right? The issue is, so the thing is, the government decides that they are able to, right, or they are actually encouraged to stay as a monopoly because that is in the interest of the consumers. Let's say water industry, right? Let's say in the water market, a firm wants to sell water to everyone. In order to sell you or to supply you the water, he has to lay the pipes, right? He has to connect the pipes to your house. So whether or not you buy from them, you have to still connect the pipe, because if they do decide to buy from you, from the consumer's perspective, they just want to open the tap and the water comes up. So it has to be so convenient. So the pipes have to all be laid out. The problem is doing all this is very expensive. Suppose you want to start a water company, you want to lay the pipes to every single house, it's going to cost a lot of money, manpower, time, right? Then you still need to have the machines, the factories, the infrastructure to distill the water, right? So how do you get the water? How do you make them clean? How do you channel them to the different houses? All this will need to coordinate and a lot of money and a lot of time, right? So in short, it's very expensive. So if we have, let's say, 5 companies selling water in the same country, all 5, if they don't share the infrastructure, they will have to all do the pipes, the piping, all the machines, everything they do themselves. But you have 5 firms doing all this, spending the same amount of money, but they only serve a small fraction of the whole company, of the whole market. That means maybe there are 100 customers. So one firm, if they do all the piping, right, and all everything, and they serve all customers, you realize that the average cost will be very low, right? Because they spread the cost over 100 customers. So we can reduce the pricing. But you have 5 firms, the firms, let's say, only serve 20 customers per month, right? Because we split all equally. So I spend the same on the machines, the infrastructure on the pipes, but I only serve 20 customers. That means I must charge a higher price to get the same profits, or I have to charge a higher price to break even. So the prices of, let's say, water will become more expensive, right? So in that case, first thing, because it is going to be cheaper, and also it's a necessity product, the government will allow the firm to remain as a monopoly. So interestingly, in Singapore's case, there's only one firm selling water, which is PUB. Okay, you can go and search PUB. There's only one firm selling water. So it is encouraged to stay as a monopoly. On the other hand, right, if you guys are familiar with Singapore's ride-hailing services, Grab, Uber, all that, right? If you are familiar, if you use this in Singapore, 2018, Grab and Uber were actually merged, right? They actually merged. So previously, we had these two as 2 companies. Then in 2018, they decided to become one company. So now if you download Uber, right, there is no Uber in Singapore. There is only Grab. So everything becomes Grab. So when they announced this, right, Singapore government in 2018 said that, hey, cannot. Because once you merge, right, you become a monopoly. It's like you're the only firm offering this service where people use the app to order the ride over. So that time, Grab and Uber say no, right? People can take taxi. People can also take the bus. They can also walk. Right? So this is not a necessity. And there are still competitors like bus, like taxis, right? We are not monopoly, but to the government, it feels like you are, right? If you define the market as using the app to order the ride as the market, then you're actually almost a monopoly already. So they went to fine Grab and Uber 13 million Sing dollars. Okay, so this happened like 6 years ago. Very interesting, right? Because one side you encourage, you allow them to be a monopoly. On the other one, once you hear the news, you immediately fine them $13 million. Of course, the merger took place, like it still took place, right? Because now there's no more Uber. And I'm pretty sure the $13 million is nothing because they will just recover from customers. Okay. But at least there was still some penalty, right? So yeah. Okay, the short answer, the gist of it is because whether it makes sense for the consumers, right? The consumers' interest, lah. Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, so no one mentioned anything about the attendance, so I think no issues about that, right? Okay, so reminder again to remember to do your quiz 2, right? Quiz 1 is closed. Don't look for me for quiz 1, okay? I haven't checked your scores, so I hope you guys did well for your quiz 1, right? But otherwise, didn't, then do much better for your quiz 2. Okay, so all the best for quiz 2. I will see you guys tomorrow at 12 p.m. as well, on Zoom. So no need to go down. This week we're all on Zoom. So just relax. And we'll go through the next maybe 1 or 2 chapters. Yeah, that's a plan. Okay, so I'm aiming to finish everything by next week. Day I see you guys. Then the second day, which is the last lecture, then we'll go through practice questions and some MCQ. Okay, to prepare for exams, right? Because we only have like 9 sessions together. Otherwise, have a great day ahead, right? Have a good rest. Then tomorrow I will see you guys at 12 p.m. as well. Okay, right? On the notes, you can feel free to refer up. Then anything you can let me know, we can discuss tomorrow. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow then, and watch the YouTube for revision also. Okay, bye-bye.